Welcome. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about with writers, especially novelists. I'm a screenwriter. I work in the movie and television industry mostly, but I also work very heavily with novelists. I teach through Stanford University, I teach through writing.com, writers.com, my own classes. And that's all novelists and creative nonfiction. So, but what I do is unusual in the sense that I'm not a creative writing person, even though I'm a writer. I've got movie projects, I've got all kinds of my own writing going on, but I'm a story guy. So I'm not really interested in people's writing per se. What I teach is story skill, which is a skill that most people, if they're creative writers, don't have a lot of exposure to. It's not something really taught in MFA programs and creative writing programs. They don't talk about story. They're more interested in the writing and in the workshopping of the writing and working on the wordsmithing and all of that, which is all important, but that's not what I do. um, and what I do is help you find that craft skill so missing in most writers' toolboxes. And it's how to construct a story and how to know even if you have a story. Okay. That's what my Anatomy of a Premise Line book is all about, which is my first book. Um, but today, what we're talking about is one little piece of that bigger picture of story development as a craft. We're going to be talking about the log line. And this is a very thorny issue because it's one that everybody kind of intuitively knows about, um, but they don't really know how to pull one of these things off. And the log line is a critical tool that you must have in your toolbox as a writer because it's a pitching tool. If you have any intention of selling your material, you've got to be able to have one of these things. So I'm going to share I hate being this guy, but I've got a big PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to blow through it. I want to get through it at least like in a half an hour. I want to get through it by 10:30 my time, Pacific time, and because I want to have at least an hour to work with you guys one on one on your log lines to show you how this process I'm going to show you works. So you're going to get, well, let me just start sharing my screen and we'll jump in here. So here's what you're going to get. You're going to get this presentation as a PDF. I'm going to throw all these free goodies in for you. I'll send these to Lucy, and you can share it with the community. You're going to get a worksheet which I've developed, which I use in my classes to sort of focus um, your writing process with this. So it's a worksheet that takes you through everything we're going to be talking about. I'm going to give you an example worksheet for the Godfather that shows you how to actually execute this worksheet with a real story. And I think you're going to get this actual webinar as a video that will be available to you. And I'm going to throw in a couple of freebies posters that I've created, which will be a surprise. You'll see those when you get them. But so you're going to get some nice swag here with this. But I want to open this with a little story. This is a true story. A few years ago, I went to the Dallas-Fort Worth Writers Conference and I was presenting there and teaching a workshop. And at the end of the conference, there's about 1,000, 1,200 people there, all writers. They have this thing called the Gong Show, where they have like 6 or 8 editors from different companies, publishing companies, sitting on the stage with gongs. And everybody in the audience is asked to write down and pitch their book. And then anonymously, and then the moderator would read their pitches out, and then if they got 3 gongs from any one of these editors on their little gongs, they were out. Almost every single writer got gonged within 30 seconds because their pitches were so insanely off. And that's when I realized, as a screenwriter, the term logline, it's part of the process of writing a screenplay and pitching it to producers. You got to have a logline. Every screenwriter knows how to do a logline. Book writers, I discovered, don't, not really. And it's not something that's really talked about. And this was proof positive to me in a real situation with real live editors that it matters. These people get 20, 30 pitches a day in their inbox with queries. And almost all of them end up in the trash bin because the writers don't get to the point and they can't pitch their books. So I developed this whole process to help novelists do exactly that. It's a pitching tool more than anything else, but it's also a development tool. It helped, as we're going to see, hopefully Tara and Thomas are here because they volunteered their log lines to actually pull those apart. And you're going to see from those examples, if we have a chance to go through those, if they're here, you will see how the log line itself is very often a window into what's missing in your story structure. Doesn't mean you don't have it. Doesn't mean you don't have a good story. Doesn't mean you don't have a good book going. But if you can't get it on the page so you can pitch it, you may as well not be there. Okay, so this process I'm going to show you is designed to help you tease these elements out. And if you don't have them, the log line will help you discover that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what you do if that's the case. But this is above all for the log line is a sales tool. And learning how to pitch your book is a whole separate skill, but it starts with the query letter, which is your foot in the door. If you don't get that first moment and you grab them, they're not going to say, oh, okay, well, what else you got? And we'll talk about what that should be, what the next step is. But it starts off with that log line in the query letter. And we're talking 35 to 50 words. Okay, that's a log line. It's not a paragraph. That's something else. Okay. So it is absolutely a sales tool, but it is also a development tool in the sense that it helps you see where some of the warts are. And that can be frustrating, but it's also a gift. Okay. These are 7 of the most common mistakes people make with log lines in terms of understanding what they are. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but the ones I really want to focus on, and you'll get this, so you can examine this and look at it later. It's kind of common sense, but the main reasons why all those writers got gonged was because they were explaining, or they were jumping in with a lot of platitudes, which are these grand statements that sound like they're saying something, but are really just these big summary statements that are so vague, no story is being told. Or they had a lot of exposition, setup, and story context before they got to the story. Okay. In other words, they never get to the good stuff. and the editors have to go through 3 or 4 sentences of setup before they even get to the protagonist. And by then you lost them. Okay. The log line has to just tell the facts. That's it. Okay. And we're going to go into that. But these are the 7 big mistakes most writers make with this stuff. Okay. So This is what you hear on the internet. If you go on the internet and type in logline, here's what you're going to get. A lot of very general summarized statements of, log lines are summaries of the description of your story. They're the essence of your book or your movie or your book idea. They're not wrong, but they're so vague that they really don't help you as a tool. The only one here in this list that even comes close is the very last one. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. But even that isn't specific enough in terms of being able to have a tool that you can use to manufacture one of these things on the page. Okay. But this is part of the problem, that the consensus out there in the creative writing world is so skewed on this that they don't really understand what it is. It's not a summary. It's not the essence. What does the essence even mean? So we need, you're going to see in a second, we're going to get to this, what I call the log line machine. Okay. And it's very precise about how you have to do this, but you have to understand what a log line is, and that it conveys lots of very specific ideas without getting so caught in the story mud that you're overtelling. I talk a lot about this thing called the premise line. And the premise line is, in fact, your entire story in one or two short sentences, the entire structure of your story, whether it's a screenplay or a book or whatever it is. Okay. That's a lot more story details, and you're actually telling a lot of your story, so you get that sense of the beginning, the middle, and the end. The log line is not that, but it captures some of that. Okay, but there is the high concept, the hook, the tone, all of that's in the premise line. In just like 2 lines of text. That's it. Oh my gosh, how the hell do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you. Now, this next slide is going to be very, what the hell is this? But this is very much breaks it out. There's the log line has a very specific form that does very specific functions. You're going to see a lot of these functions in the machine. Okay. So what I want you to understand here is that you're actually creating a very particular kind of formatted thing, a form on the page, but it's got very specific content. It's not this vagary stuff. It's very specific. Okay. We're going to skip this next one. And we're going to get right to the darn machine. Here's what the logline machine is. This is it right here. What you do is you take your story and you identify, and this is what you do on the worksheet. You identify these story components. What is the world? It's the world of your story. Okay, it's the story world. If it's a magical world of wizards and students and it's Hogwarts, there you go. That's the world. If it's American crime families in the 1950s and the 60s, there it is. That's the world. You identify the world. If it's 2 guys having dinner talking in a restaurant, that's the world. My Dinner with Andre. Okay, one of my favorite movies. That's the world. Make it clear. Identify what the world is. Who's the protagonist? You have to identify who the hero or the heroine is. Oh, well, I've got 17 protagonists. They're all important. I can't just I'm writing a novel, for crying out. It's going to be 5,000 pages long. I've got lots of protagonists. No, you don't. You've got one. And you need I'm not saying all the characters aren't important. I'm not saying no, but every story needs a dramatic focus. Even these big ensemble kind of pieces. Unless you're writing something like Song of Ice and Fire of like George R.R. Martin, where you've got 7 books and many, many thousands of pages, none of those books have a protagonist. They're all like 5, 6 storylines, all paralleling each other, intertwining through all the books. And each of those storylines has its protagonist, but the books themselves do not, except for the first one. Maybe that's Ned Stark's story. But he can pull that off because it's a huge story space. And George R.R. Martin is a TV writer, so he knows his stuff. He knows how to write. So he's able to pull that off because of the way he's designed all these books. But every storyline he's telling us has a protagonist in it. Okay. Your book, excuse me, if it's a standalone novel, is going to have one character who stands out. And we'll talk about how you figure out who your protagonist is when you've got multiple people in your story who have a sense of equal dramatic weight. They don't. There's 3 questions you ask to figure out who that person is. And we can talk about that. What's their problem? What's their angst? What are they dealing with internally? You don't want to go into the family history and that they were dropped on their head in the hospital as a baby. You don't want to go into all that, but we want to get some sense of them. And we'll see that with Jessica Jones, or the example next we're going to look at. So you want world, you want protagonist, you want what's their angsty internal thing they're dealing with? What's their goal? What do they want? They do not want to be loved. They don't want to be one with God. They don't want to find peace and happiness. Those are all very nice things, but how the hell are you going to write that? You've got to have a form that those abstractions are going to take in the story, that when the character gets that thing, then they will have happiness. Then they will have oneness with God. Then they will be happy. It's got to have a face. It's got to have a tangible form. So they need to be going. They need to be going for the goal. They need to be going for the girl. They need to be going for the new job. They need a specific goal. Solving the mystery, solving the threat, whatever it is. The aliens have invaded. They've got to get out alive. That's their goal. Okay. Then what's the challenge? That's different than the goal, but related. The challenge is, what's the big overarching threat that everybody's under, even in a small little story. My dinner with Andre, 2 guys in a restaurant having dinner talking. There's a challenge there. There's a problem. Andre is trying to get Wally to change. Wally is a robot. And Andre's pushing his buttons the whole dinner, trying to get him to see that. Wally doesn't want to see it. That's the challenge. Okay, Wally's being pushed. In Godzilla is coming to destroy San Francisco. Okay, there's the challenge. 2 different different stories, but there's a very clear story challenge. Who's the opposition? Oh, well, I've got lots of opponents, just like I have lots of protagonists. And you will have lots of points of opposition in a story. You've got to have more than one point of opposition, but there will always be one person. Well, it's the dark forces. Evil wizards are the opposition. The evil wizards have to have a face. One of them has to stand out. They're the one trying to stop the hero wizard from getting whatever the hero wizard is trying to get. That's where the opposition is. Okay. The protagonist has a goal. The opponent's trying to stop the protagonist from getting the goal. Basic story structure 101. Then you have to give them some kind of choice or action at the end of the log line. So many people end their log lines with, and then something really cool happens at the end. Or with, well, let's see what our hero does next. Throw in that kind of salesy, pitchy stuff. The writers, the reader, whoever it is going to go, oh boy, you're going to get rejected. Give us the end of the story in the form of, what is an impossible choice, a no-win choice that the protagonist is going to have to make because of everything you've just set up. They've done this and this and this and this, the challenge and this and the opponent and that, and now the hero is going to have to decide whether to do this or whether to do that. Oh my gosh, and both of those are bad choices. That leaves the reader with a very clear sense of where you're going and that this is going to go somewhere, And that even though intuitively you kind of know what kind of decision they're going to make, maybe not. Okay. And if you don't do that, you got to end it on some action that's really wow, some big defining moment of the character transforming, and then everything changes. Okay. That could also work. Okay. So this is the machine. When you write your log line, and we're going to do this, when you write your log line, you actually you take them on a piece of paper and you put them in order, and then you fill in the blanks. That's how you build this thing. It's that mechanical. It's not easy, but it's that directed and that precise. Okay. And now we're going to look at some examples of log lines. Excuse me. To show you what I mean here. Now, these are a little long. You want your log line to be between 35 and 50 words, ideally. Okay. Any more than that, you're pushing it. You're pushing credibility. Because like I said, the person reading this has 25 more of those in their inbox that morning. And the editorial meeting is going to be happening in an hour, and they've got to go through all those in the next hour and come with 5 recommendations to the editorial committee. Okay. So you can't give them a whole lot. You've got to be very precise. So here are 3. Hopefully you've seen at least 2 of these, Godfather and Hunger Games. You're probably familiar with those or read the books. Jessica Jones is probably one of the best superhero, anti-hero TV shows ever written. At least season 1 was. Season 2 wasn't so good, but season 1 was just over the top. Incredible writing. And here is the log line for that pilot episode. Okay. In a world of superheroes that hide in the shadows, we know exactly what the world is. There's no question here. A woman with super strength and anger issues. Okay, we know who the protagonist is. She's a super and she's pissed off. We don't have to know why. We don't have to know what. Okay. Discovers that the supervillain, right, who once forced her to kill against her will, there's her problem, is still alive. And that's the challenge. The guy's going to be coming after her again. We know her problem. We know who the opponent is. We know what the challenge is going to be. And she must now decide whether to run for her life or find and kill him before he re-enslaves her again. That's the pilot. And that's exactly what she does at the end of the show. She makes the choice to stay and fight. She doesn't know whether she's going to win or die in that conflict. And we don't know. But this has all the elements. It doesn't tell you what's going on in the pilot. We don't know anything about her best friend. We don't know anything about the guy she's teamed with. We don't know anything about what's going on with the case she's investigating or the love interest she's going to be developing. None of that's in here. And most writers would try to dump all that into the log line, and they would get so convoluted that they would lose what's called the A-line story. That's what your log line has to be. Your book, your novel, or creative nonfiction work has a main storyline. That's the A-line story. That's the protagonist's goal, journey, opposition, growth, and change. Everything else in the book is at service to that storyline. All the other subplots you have, and subplots is a whole other animal, but all the other stories you have going on are at service to that. Okay. Those are B line, C line, D line. You'll have many subplots in your books, but you have to have an A line. Otherwise you don't have a story. That's the A line. The Godfather. We'll go through one more. Okay. After a mafia don is shot, by rivals. Okay, there's the setup. His youngest son, there's the protagonist. Notice we're not giving people's names. We're not saying Jessica Jones or Michael Corleone. You don't name names. Okay, you leave things undefined in that way. The youngest son, kept shielded from the family business, which is what Michael was all of his life, is pulled into his clan's criminal world. Now we know exactly who. We got a mafia don in a criminal world. We know the world. We know the setup. We know who the character is. When he volunteers to exact family revenge, resulting in a bloody war with a rival don, forcing him to have to choose between a normal life or becoming the new godfather. That's the whole thing right there. We know the world, we know the protagonist, we know the setup, we know the challenge, we know the horrible choice he's going to have to make. Kay is always in the background offering him a normal life, and he's always torn between these two things. And he turns into the monster. This is a tragic story, right? He turns into a horrible, horrible monster, and the horror of it is he doesn't realize it. He thinks he's doing the right thing, right? So again, this is a little long, but it's snappy and it's engaging, and it gives you a lot of sexy elements of the story. So you can get away with 53 words or 56 words here, okay? But this could probably be wordsmithed down a little bit tighter, okay? So this is what you're going for. Are you? Is this making a little sense? Yeah. So this is what log lines are all about. Okay. So okay, Jeff Lyons, thank you very much. What the hell do I do with this? Okay, I've got a story. I've got a book. How do I? Here's how. There's a strategy to this. Okay, it's very straightforward. First, you get the pieces in order. Literally, try to use the worksheet you're going to get, because it takes you through each of the pieces, and you're going to get a how-to video on how to use the worksheet. So you'll have a video talking about all these pieces again. You know, I'm going to explain in the video what the steps are. Put them on a piece of paper. We're going to do it right now with somebody. Once you get the pieces and you feel confident you've got the pieces, then you start connecting the pieces. You start trying to actually tell a story. Then when you get a log line, it could be, maybe it's going to be 5 lines long. It's going to be way longer than it needs to be. That's okay. Now the next step is you start wordsmithing. Now you start cutting back. Now you start taking out the adjectives. Now you start getting very strategic about your word choices, making sure that the next piece is that you're nailing the tone and the genre. If it's a story about magic, you want magical words. If it's a horror story, you want to be horrible. If it's a mystery, you want to use mystery language. You want to use some of the key terminology of the genre you're in, so that it conveys it without you having to get into what the horror is per se. It'll save you a lot. Use language as your friend in this case. Okay, remember this is sales, sales, sales. Okay, then you cut, and you want to get down to 2 lines, 2.5 lines max, 35 to 50 words. This is gonna take you a while. You know, at least could be taking you a full week to really hammer on this. Then when all this is done and you got what you think is going to work, then you go to your beta readers and you say, "What do you think?" Not your mother. Don't give this to your mother. You're gonna get praise. Okay, unless she's an editor at Random House. Okay, then that might work. But otherwise, give it to your beta readers, or find, if you don't have beta readers, what writer friends do you have that you know who can read your logline and give you feedback? Unit test this. Take it out into the world and try and see what the feedback is you get. What's working? What's not working? Where are they getting caught up? If they're asking questions that are, oh my gosh questions, what happens next questions, does this mean that they did this? Does this mean that this happened in the past? If their imagination is triggered and they're starting to fill in dramatic connections about what might be or what has been, or that's great news. You got them. You hooked them. But if they're asking questions like, wait a minute, now you said here that it was this, and now you're saying this. How did they get from here to here? I don't understand. If they start picking it apart, trying to logically understand what it is you're saying, now you got a problem. Okay, so the nature of the questions you get back as feedback tells you volumes about what you're missing. Okay.